So, Governor, this is the first event held by the Law and Leadership Program. We've heard from former governors, we've heard from former senators. What's your goal with all this for both the students and the community as a whole?
Well, the biggest goal is to give them some examples of leadership throughout the country and our state. We have a changing world right now, and pretty partisan in Washington, D.C., and so particularly for the students that are our new generation of leaders, really to see where the big decisions in our state's history and other states' histories have been made and how they were made.
Are you worried at all that it seems with the remove of history, you're not in the arena. People have a different perspective. They look back on it and kind of maybe remember the past and more fondly than they were when they were actually in the arena. Is it more difficult for people who are actually governing now to put some of these principles into place, or do you think these can be applied no matter whether you're a former lawmaker or a current one?
Well, I think they can always be applied, but of course you're right. It's difficult when you're in the moment, and that's part of it. Is hopefully perhaps something that somebody heard today will give them that courage of conviction to make that decision, whether it goes against party, whether it goes against friends, what have you. So that's the point of this. But again, if somebody may be in a situation now and then listening to somebody that's already been there, that again it'll give him that courage to do the right thing.
We heard from Senator Bryan, I believe it was, when he said when he was elected to the Assembly there were no caucuses, there were no caucus votes, and the very concept of telling someone how they ought to vote on something was alien to the process. Certainly we know that's not true now. The partisanship has increased, but you were known as somebody who kind of worked across the aisle and got people to cooperate when there was still partisan fervor in the air. So how exactly did you do that, and do you think those lessons could be applied in Washington today?
Well, I was blessed to have great mentors. So when I was in the legislature, Joe Dini, a Democrat, was the Speaker. Bill Raggio, a Republican, was the Senate Majority Leader, and I probably was in the Speaker's office more often than I was in anyone else's office. And he truly was a leader that worked across the aisle. I also had the benefit of, when I was younger, being an intern for Paul Laxalt, who was somebody that was known to work across the aisle as well. And finally, as an Attorney General, Kenny Gwinn was somebody that I had as a mentor as well. And that's, again, coming back to this Law and Leadership Program, is showing these students and giving them an example that you can still do this, that you can still work across the aisle and you can still be respected.
It seems like in Washington, Senator Heller said it, there's a bill, it's a good bill, it's a bill somebody would ordinarily want to vote for, but the wrong person's name is on it, the wrong party's name is on it, and therefore they don't want to support that legislation simply for that reason. How do you overcome that? Somebody who knows what the right thing is to do but can't do it or chooses not to do it just because of partisanship.
Well, I mean, that's something that has to change. I mean, a good bill is a good bill, and it has to come down and remind people while they're there, why they're there. And that's for their constituents. And what's in the best interests of their constituents? It should be irrelevant whose name is on a bill, if there's a personality involved. If it's something that can help people and you agree with, and you should support it.
You didn't take the bait when they tried to lure you into the whole Donald Trump question. In many ways, your entire career has sort of been a repudiation of that style of politics, the denigration, the narcissism that we see so often. Senator Reid and Senator Bryan seem to suggest that Donald Trump had fundamentally changed the country and had ruined the Republican brand. You're a Republican. Do you think that's the case? Are you worried about the brand of your party being ruined by Donald Trump?
Well, what I'm concerned about is the extremism. I think we've got to get more toward the middle, and what we just talked about, working together for common decisions that benefit the people. Governor Gregoire talked about that. The former governors talked about that. What is a good idea shouldn't matter whether it's Republican or Democrat or whoever the individual is. So I'm someone who didn't support the president. I supported John Kasich during the election for president. We can all hope that things will change and that we've got an election coming up, and the people are going to have their opportunity to speak.
I won't ask you who you're going to go for this time because your choices are going to be more limited. It looks like Governor Kasich has not yet indicated whether he'll get in the race. But let me ask you this. And granted, this is a hypothetical question. I know you don't like those, but if you were in Washington, D.C. today, in this environment, in this toxic environment, what would you do? How would you try to get the message for the Paul Laxalt wing of the Republican Party, the Brian Sandoval wing of the Republican Party? How would you try to get that across so that you could get something done when it seems like Congress can't get hardly anything done?
Well, I'd conduct myself how I've always conducted myself, and that is to work across the aisle, work with the Democratic Party, come together. You know, you've got to be able to compromise, and compromise is not a weakness. If you can get a good piece of legislation, you know, they talked about individuals being intimidated and not being willing to speak up. You got to have, as I mentioned before, that courage of conviction and being willing to speak up. And if something is a good idea, fight for it, without regard to whose idea it is.
Sounds good. Well, Governor, thanks very much for taking the time with us, and maybe, who knows, maybe there'll be a future governor in the audience here among the students.
It's true, and you know, hopefully someday they'll say, something I heard really inspired me at that Law and Leadership program.
Sounds great. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you.